All right, today we are diving headfirst into one of the oldest, most mind-bending challenges in all of philosophy, skepticism. It's that little nagging voice in the back of your head that questions everything you think you know for sure. For centuries, some of the smartest people around have been trying to shut that voice up. So, how do we fight back against the ultimate doubt? Let's get into it. So, to really get a feel for what we're up against, I want to start with a really simple, direct question. It gets right to the heart of the whole problem. And it's probably a question you've never ever seriously asked yourself, but the skeptic says you absolutely have to. No, really, go on, look at them, wiggle your fingers. They seem, undeniably there, right? But what if that feeling, that very sensation of seeing and feeling them, what if that's all part of an elaborate illusion? What if your senses are lying to you in the most profound way you can imagine? And this question right here leads us to one of the most famous and frankly unsettling thought experiments in all of philosophy. And just a heads up, this isn't some throwaway sci-fi idea. Oh no, this is a precision-engineered tool designed to completely dismantle everything you think you know for certain. And here's the truly terrifying part. If you were a brain in a vat, your experience would be identical from the inside. Every single sight, every feeling, every memory, it would all be completely indistinguishable from reality. There'd be no glitch in the matrix, no little alarm bell in your head to warn you that the hands you think you see aren't actually there. Okay, so let's see how philosophers take this creepy idea and turn it into a formal logical argument. Because the brain in a vat scenario isn't just a spooky story, it's the foundation for a logical trap that is incredibly, incredibly difficult to escape. It's basically designed to be a trap. It's based on this principle called closure, which is just the simple idea that if you know something, you should also know all of its obvious consequences. So the argument starts with things that seem totally reasonable, but it leads you to a conclusion that feels completely absurd, forcing you to question either your own logic or your most basic beliefs. Man, the logic just feels airtight, doesn't it? Premise one, you can't know for sure you're not a Biff, because the experience would be identical. Okay, seems plausible. Premise two, well, if you don't know you're not a Biv, then you can't really know you have hands. That also seems to follow. So, if you accept those two simple steps, the crazy conclusion is inescapable. You don't know you have hands. And this, right here, is the central challenge. The argument leads us somewhere we just refuse to go. It feels fundamentally wrong. But where exactly does the argument go wrong? This is where philosophy really rolls up its sleeves and gets to work, trying to find an escape hatch. So, over the years, philosophers have come up with three major strategies for dealing with the skeptic's argument. Each one tries to dismantle this trap in a totally different way, targeting a different piece of the skeptic's logic. Okay, our first response comes from a philosopher named G.E. Moore. His approach was, well, he basically decided the best way to deal with this intricate logical trap was to just kick the door down with some good old-fashioned common sense. He said the skeptic has it completely backwards. Moore's move is just brilliant in its simplicity. He takes the skeptic's argument and just flips it right on its head. He starts with the thing he's most sure of. I know that I have hands. And then he uses the skeptic's own logic to get to the exact opposite conclusion. Therefore, I know that I am not a Biv. He's basically saying, look, my certainty about having hands is way, way stronger than any philosophical premise you can throw at me. The second strategy takes a completely different approach. It doesn't question our certainty, but it does question what we need to be certain about. It kind of redefines the rules for what it even takes to have knowledge in the first place. So the idea here is pretty simple. You don't have to rule out every single bizarre, out there possibility to know something. To know that bird in your backyard is a goldfinch, you have to be able to tell it apart from, say, a sparrow. But you don't have to prove it's not a super advanced government spy drone disguised as a bird. This theory argues the brain in a vat scenario is like that spy drone. It's just not a relevant alternative. So you can know you have hands without having to disprove you're a Biv. All right, our third escape route is maybe the most flexible one of all. Contextualism says, hey, maybe the problem isn't with our knowledge or even with the skeptic's logic. Maybe the problem is with our language, specifically with that little word, no. So, according to contextualists, the word no can mean different things in different situations. Think about it. If you're at a party and someone asks if you know your friend Jane, easy. But if you're in a courtroom under oath, the standard for knowing what Jane was doing on Tuesday night is way, way higher. It's the same idea here. In everyday life, the standard is low enough that, yeah, you know you have hands. But in a philosophy class talking about brains and vats, the standards for knowledge suddenly get ridiculously high. And maybe, just maybe, in that specific context, you don't know. So there we have it, 3 really clever ways out of the skeptic's trap. But, as with pretty much everything in philosophy, there's a catch. Every single one of these responses comes with a cost. It creates new problems, or it forces us to accept some very strange ideas. And this table just lays it all out for us, nice and simple. You can see more goes straight for premise 1, relevant alternatives zeroes in on premise 2, and then contextualism just tries to sidestep the entire argument by saying the words themselves change meaning depending on where you are. Okay, so what's the downside to each of these elegant solutions, right? If they're so great, why isn't this debate over? Well, let's take a look at the main criticisms, because this is where the plot really, really thickens. So Moore's response, as bold as it is, can feel a little unsatisfying. It's kind of like responding to a really complex argument by just stamping your foot and yelling, "No!" It asserts we have this knowledge, but it doesn't really explain how we have it. The relevant alternatives theory, on the other hand, forces us into a very, very bizarre position, which leads us to our next slide. This statement right here is famously known as the abominable conjunction, and it's called that for a reason. If you accept the relevant alternatives theory, this sentence is actually logically consistent, but it just sounds completely absurd, doesn't it? It violates that powerful intuition that if you truly know you have hands, then you must also know you're not in some situation where you don't have them. At this point, you might be throwing your hands up and wondering, what is the point of all of this? I mean, if every single solution has a problem, why even bother? But, maybe winning the argument isn't the ultimate goal here. When it comes down to it, the real value in all this is that struggling with skepticism forces us to get way clearer on what we even mean by words like knowledge, justification, and certainty. You can think of the skeptic's argument as a kind of stress test for our entire belief system. By going through this whole philosophical gauntlet, we learn so much. We're forced to think about what actually counts as good evidence. We see that huge gap between being pretty sure about something and being logically certain. And maybe most of all, it just reveals all these hidden assumptions that our entire view of the world rests on. It's a humbling exercise, but an incredibly valuable one. And that's really the question we're left with, isn't it? The skeptical challenge isn't really an enemy we need to defeat. It's more like a constant companion that keeps pushing us to define the boundary of what we can truly claim to know. It asks us and you to decide for yourself what's good enough. That's our look at the influential responses to skepticism.